Yeah, I knew video game movies were a mistake. So talking about video game related movies isn't a new thing to this channel, as I've touched on the subject of not only video game related movies, but specifically the upcoming Sonic the Hedgehog movie, which has since been updated with all sorts of crazy news in itself. But we will get back to the Sonic movie another day, another video. Right now, let's talk about this new Mario movie coming soon. It was confirmed after many different rumors and speculation that they would be making a brand new Super Mario Bros. Movie. Now, the idea of Nintendo stepping out of their shell and expanding through new ways has always personally interested me. You see, as a kid, I always did want things like movies and other mediums for my favorite video game series. It just excites me when I see an IP like Mario or Sonic in something other than a video game. But as you know, video game movies have always had a very weird track record. And by weird, I mean most video game movies have always ended up hilariously bad or very forgettable. And there are a few video game movies that have yet to break the track record. The few that have being movies that aren't even fully based on a pure video game property. So naturally, Nintendo, one of the biggest video game companies out there, along with Sega, stepping into the spotlight with full movies is a big deal. And the reason I think these movie debates will be bigger than before is these movies could very well determine the future of video game related movies. Ever since Nintendo's Great Disaster of Weirdness that was their first attempt at a full Mario movie, they strayed far away from movies and never looked back. We know that even multiple studios approached Nintendo in a deep desire for their IPs, because you know Hollywood is more desperate than ever to turn any medium into a movie. So with this Mario movie, its overall impact is going to be pretty important for how Nintendo medium goes forward. Not that this movie will start some crazy Nintendo cinematic universe. I mean, it could. I've written some pretty weird ideas for an NCU, as I like to call it. But no, I think that another Mario movie failing could possibly scare Nintendo into crawling right back into their shell and not coming back out for a while. And I don't want that. Well, kind of. Now, if I have to be honest, I've lost faith in video game Hollywood adaptations. What I really want to see more of is things like more anime series, more TV shows, things that allow these video game properties to build their stories as opposed to being condensed into 1 to 2 hour cinema experiences. Video games just work too differently to be condensed into these formulas without it being super weird next to the source material. For books, it can work a little better because those are full stories at least. Video games have a heavy emphasis on gameplay, and unless your game is full on The Last of Us where story is the key focus, then your game has a lot of work to do in order to translate into a full movie. But now that I've talked about the subject in terms of the concept of the Mario movie, let's finally talk about the few confirmed details we know. The first piece we know that sets it up much better than the original Mario movie is that it is a CGI 3D animation as opposed to being live action. And thank God. That, in my eyes, is always the first mistake with a lot of these video game movies, especially the ones based on more cartoony and colorful characters. Live action CGI is just not the element it is meant to work with, and it always leads these movies far from the source material. Big reason I have a lot of concerns for the Sonic movie. While you could argue why a live action Sonic movie could work, let's just be honest with ourselves. With how Sega is and their blinding weakness of following trends, it is easy to see how the Sonic movie could go wrong due to going the exact formula of live-action CGI movies such as Alvin and the Chipmunks, the Smurfs, etc. The Mario movie doesn't have to worry about this anymore. Being a more animation-focused movie, it doesn't have to worry about every little thing of what it can do and what it can't do from the cartoony elements of Mario into live action. Because this is what the original Mario movie sacrificed. It simply threw Mario names and elements into something that wasn't Mario. It was more sci-fi and trendy. It didn't look like Mario, it didn't feel like Mario. It was just this movie that had Mario names in it. So that is one element that is not worrisome. However, now that we get into the weird elements of that, I have a lot of questions. What is worrisome in potential setup for disaster? Literally everything else. So the first question that comes up is, how do you do a Mario movie? But that's not the problem in itself, it's how you do a Mario, really anything, with a reliance of story that isn't an RPG. Let's just get to the point. Unlike Sonic, our boy Mario here, in terms of his most popular games, ain't known for story. Over 90% of the game's plot amounts to Mario and some friends rescuing this hopeless broad from this guy and some other baddies. That summarizes a huge chunk of Mario stories, and obviously, if you want to do a traditional Mario movie, that's going to play a huge part of most of the movie. That first Mario movie couldn't even get this right. Peach wasn't even in the movie. Yeah, the girl who is responsible for most of the plots of this series wasn't in the movie. Yet Daisy was. Heck, Pauline kind of was. Fun fact, Pauline was in that movie. Kinda. And this is before Odyssey and all that, so no one even knew who the heck she was. So it's safe to say that the classic Bowser kidnaps Peach plot will be a big factor, no questions. So we can expect Mario, Luigi, Peach, the Toads, Bowser, and some Bowser goons, and maybe some other characters to be in for sure. But everything else is up in the air since we don't know how traditional this movie will want to be. What range of Mario games will it use for its inspiration? One thing is for sure, because of how few Mario characters have cinema traits, and because how cookie-cutter the Mario formula is, it is pretty much guaranteed that this movie will have to shake things up to make a full movie here. We will need more characters, we will need actual dialogue, and we will get some non-traditional concepts here for sure. But to what extent is what we have yet to see? If I had to give some ideas of how to tell a traditional Mario story with non-traditional elements, the RPGs are the closest thing to look towards. They pretty much usually have part of their plots mess around with the traditional formula, while also adding characters, settings, and other things necessary to spice it up beyond just the gameplay. But there is also a double-edged sword of sorts in terms of the writing process of the Mario movie, and that is in the form of how close Nintendo is to the project. Unlike a lot of video game movies, here we see that Nintendo has some close hands on this project. And a huge way is that we have series creator Shigeru Miyamoto as a writer of the story. Now the positive side is that this will keep the movie grounded as close to what we know of Mario as possible. The movie will be on the safer side and we won't have to worry of really weird scenes that don't feel Mario at all. And that is a really good thing. But like I said, it's a double-edged sword. The negative thing people are not really pointing out is that Miyamoto is not necessarily known for story. This is Miyamoto we're talking about. Look, I have all the respect I can muster for the guy. He's done great things for Nintendo and gaming as a whole. But it's no secret that Miyamoto has some very old school ideals and is also not a fan of deeply thought out storytelling. This is no little secret. And the reason why this could potentially hurt the movie is while this helps the movie not be too ugly bad of a disaster, it could also make the movie too safe and too dull. A big thing that comes to mind is that point I mentioned on adding new things to help spice up the traditional formula. And when Miyamoto gets a lot of control, he can be a little too safe. I don't want a Mario movie where potentially most of the cast is just generic Toads because Miyamoto is scared to add a character that isn't from the original Super Mario Bros. On the NES. I want boundaries to be played with, otherwise there's no real point to fully doing a movie. But at the same time, it's understandable why it's hard to figure out what boundaries to push exactly. For example, voice acting. Which characters should talk and shouldn't talk? Should Mario remain voiced by Charles Martinet? Could we really deal with a whole movie of the normal Mario voice, or would we need to change it? Another double-edged sword. But outside of the story, it also comes with who is making the movie and what influence they will have. This movie is being done by Illumination, most well known for doing the Despicable Me movies, more specifically, the creator of the Minions. Oh, it is a dark day on this channel that I have to show an image of one of these guys. But anyway, I feel like the studio will also play a big part in how this movie is going to end up being structured. Now, Illumination doesn't have the greatest track record. They aren't Sony Animation, but they still aren't the best movie studio possible to work with to build a beloved, long-lasting animated flick. I do give props to Illumination in that their CGI does look good and they can do scenes really well, but it varies in quality between films. I also think that Illumination puts a big emphasis on being trendy at times and also loves crazy humor, which, as I discussed earlier, can lead to some very weird decisions when it comes to the movie as a whole. But again, we do have Nintendo very close to the project, so it will prevent Illumination from doing anything too wacky with the Mario property. I hope. So in summary, this movie is going to be a tricky little thing to make due to the groundwork of video game movies never being smooth. It's going to be interesting to see how Miyamoto and others on the project attempt to bring Mario to the big screen because there are a lot of elements that have to be considered. I can't say I have 100% hope in this movie just yet, but I still at least think this movie will at least go on a much better route than the Sonic movie, because I just think that the Sonic movie is on a route that is much darker and just... we'll get to that. Anyway, so that's my overall analysis of this Mario movie. Now, do I have any personal wants for the film? Not really. I mean, we just don't know what to expect, so it's hard to make any hard requests on what I want realistically. But I guess it wouldn't hurt to say some obvious things in conjunction with my points. As I said, I want boundaries played with. I do not want to see what is basically New Super Mario Bros. The movie, where most of the cast is Toads and the movie is super safe and has no ambition. I want a good variety of characters, but maybe not too many. I want Nintendo to use more of the Marioverse to its fullest. As I've said, Nintendo underutilizes their IPs. Characters, locations, and such under their IP need to be used more so that they can really bring the best out of the Mario world into a cinema experience. Granted, if they want, they can also maybe create some new original elements. I know they'll have to since, again, most of the characters don't really talk much, so maybe they'll have to add more characters that do talk more. It's going to be really interesting to see what choices they make when it comes to all that stuff. Personally though, I would work with what we have in the current Mario IP since it is only the first movie. I wouldn't get too crazy with the original stuff just yet. Not necessarily related to a previous point, but another thing I eagerly want to see is some cool Easter eggs. I don't know, I'm just a big fan of Easter eggs in movies, and if Nintendo did do movies or whatever, I want to see plenty. Luckily, Nintendo loves their Easter eggs, and it's usually a regular thing they do. Again, I'm not asking they go deep and try to set up this cinematic universe, as cool as it would be if done right, but just giving love to not just Mario, but Nintendo as a whole through small references would be really cool, and a good way to introduce people into the world of Nintendo even more. But yeah, other than that though, I want to play the wait and see game and see what Nintendo managed to come up with. And once we start seeing more details for this movie, I will revisit this topic and we will talk about it in more detail. Alright guys, that's all I have to say for today. What do you think of this upcoming Super Mario Bros. Movie? What should the plot be? What characters should be in it? Let me know in the comments below. Please leave a like if you thought this discussion was intriguing, and subscribe if you want more videos like this. This is Nux, and I'm out. Peace.